Good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of The Conversation. I am your host for the evening, Mr. Roger A. Franco. So as I've mentioned on previous shows, definitely one of the things I wanted to do with the conversation is to highlight individuals who are heavily involved in our communities, doing community-based work and activism, as well as being very influential in our culture. So I definitely thought I need to sit down with this brother who's sitting to my right now, goes by the name of Sunez Allah, part of the Nation of Gods and Earths. So we definitely going to have a dope conversation here tonight. Thank you, brother, for coming through.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I just wanted to give a little bit of this man's resume here. As I said, he's been very influential in our community. So just to tell you a little bit about who he is. He is an accomplished author. He's an editor. He is a journalist, definitely very influential in the world of hip hop. And I think just in our culture in general. He has edited such works as Knowledge of Self, a collection of wisdom on the science of everything in life, written by Supreme Understanding. He's also edited The Righteous Way by Allah. He also has written his own work, The Sunez Crates, and we're also going to talk about his most recent work that he is putting out, The Filtered Real, Essays from the Invisible Renaissance. He is also executive editor for PremierHipHop.com. He also is the host of the Power Right Show on S Street Media, as well as Classic Storm Radio. He's involved in martial arts. And, one of the biggest things why I really wanted to sit down and talk with this brother is he currently teaches the Peace course at the Allah School in Mecca in Manhattan. So, as you could see, definitely a wide range of things that he gets involved with. So, again, thank you for being here, brother.
Peace to everyone out there.
So, first off, what I wanted to get into was you teaching at the Allah School in Mecca. So just to give a little background on the school, how long has it been in existence? How did it start and whatnot?
Yeah, the school was founded by who we call Allah the Father, right? Mm-hmm. Allah. And he, most notably, to give a short history, he was part of the Nation of Islam, but he broke away from it. He left it because he disagreed with their interpretation of their teachings, though. Okay. So it basically said that the original man is God. And he took that and said, I will actualize that, and I will not be a Muslim who submits to the will of Allah, who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, which is what the Nation of Islam teaches, and that's fine with what they teach. But he wasn't agreeing with it. So he left, and he started to do just kind of organically community work because he realized that teaching the youth was much easier and much more profound than trying to teach elders anything at all. So he started to teach these young brothers that they're true living God. They giving them self-worth, focusing them on studies. Mm-hmm. And as he went along, though, he was very vibrant in the community. So working through the deputy mayor, that Barry Gother, this deputy mayor that was sent by the mayor, John Lindsay, at the time, and he was sending deputy mayors to all the neighborhoods that were in distress, the black and brown, mainly the black communities, right? And that was the Harlem deputy mayor. And, working through him and others, he was able to get certain things for the gods. And one of them was, and maybe the most pinnacle, was that building on 126th Street and 7th Avenue. And it really was, at first it was just a school, a small, I always forget the name of this, even when I'm teaching. You know what I mean? And it's funny because I know all the guys that went through it, but it mainly was supposed to be like a type of schooling that would allow students that were missing certain credits or grades to get into college. So many of the older guys that we know, they got through and they were able to do that. So it was like a service, but it eventually morphed into what we called Street Academy at the time, and it ended up being a school. When I was in college, I was writing in my school newspaper, Baruch College, and I was also at the same time starting to have a career writing in hip-hop magazines. And one of the brothers I met in both areas was a brother by the name of Day Sun, right? And he told me, like, listen, the columns you write and publish, you keep saying you're God. And I was just kind of taking the most high title that a lot of these rappers were taking. I was like, if they can say it, I'm gonna take the best title.
Right.
And he told me there's a school that teaches that. So I was like, wow. So I eventually went out with him, you know, but I took it very serious. He may have told me this in like 1998, very seriously. And I tried to learn as much as I could and went there in 1999. I was a respectable enough student that the teachers that taught me prepared me not only to use these teachings to learn in myself and grow, but also to teach others. So I started to teach my own course the very next year. So in 2000, I started to teach the peace course, and it was named by Daesun.
Okay.
He had made up like a draft for it, and it was to be political education and civilization enrichment.
Okay.
And it morphed into what I developed the curriculum as, and I developed it as like a two-sided thing. Political education, how we black and brown men and women can deal with the outside world. And civilization enrichment, the science of everything in life, because we were teaching this claim of spirituality, but we were teaching it as a science. You were never meant to believe it. You're always meant to challenge it, to study it, to see what was wrong in it, to study different sciences. So that was the balance in the curriculum. And I started teaching it in around April, May of 2000. And I have been teaching it every Thursday night since.
Wow.
So
that's a good 19 years.
Yeah.
You've been staying at it. So congratulate you and salute you for doing that. So when you first started to go to the school and you were getting involved, what was it that sort of kept your interest, that drew you to it, that you realized is something you wanted to be serious about?
I think that it was college, and it was my college mentor, David Taraveso, that he was the first Puerto Rican I ever met, because I'm a Puerto Rican lineage, and I never met a Puerto Rican that had a PhD, and he has a PhD in, I think, about 5 master's degrees. You know? And I had taken this course and I went late because I was like, I'm Puerto Rican, I'll pass everything. You know what I mean? This is the kind of ignorance I had, and goal. And he really became my mentor and really furthered me to question everything. You know, so if I said, hey, I think I'm God, he would make me write something about that. He wouldn't tell me no. Even if he disagreed, he would have me write about it. And I was radicalized to these ideas of Puerto Rican independence and freedom, and, you know, also being a community activist in the street, just looking at rallies, things like that. You know, I was going in college during the time of Anthony Baez, you know, and then, you know, leading up to all these other things. So it kind of was all coinciding. But once I started to, in college, also write about hip hop music, just being a writer and trying to do something extracurricular to appease my mother. And I realized the more I was learning about hip hop and the lyrics, the more I was questioning what they were dealing with. And that's really what kind of got me thinking, like, oh, okay, what is this about spirituality? Because the Christianity that we're taught, I don't agree with it, you know? And it went from there. I never really agreed with organized anything, you know? And that really was dealing whether with the radical revolutionary groups or was dealing with anything regarding spirituality. So when I started to deal with this knowledge of self, it was very independently centered, even though it was within the community. So, you know, you would learn from books, but you mainly were learning from firsthand teaching. But it was also about you taking firsthand teaching and not really having it unless you went and did something to prove it. So it wasn't enough that I told you a source or that I told you that something was true. I actually it was mandatory that I go find it and prove it in some different way.
Oh, okay.
You know, so for me, that took away the dangers of religiosity and cult-like status that I was attributing to everything in the universe as a young man. You know, and that's really why I dealt with it, you know, and teaching was always something I was good at doing, able to say things in a simpler way and guiding people toward things. And it just worked that way. Okay. You know, it just worked that way.
So as you're coming up, or how did you come up with the curriculum? Is it something that's been consistent for the past 19 years, or do you sort of change it each year depending on?
When people ask me, like, when it's the school is a voluntary center for the youth. So people can come there all the time, or they could come there whenever they feel like it, right? And so every Thursday, I don't know who's going to come in, although I may have an idea.
Okay.
So at any given time, though, the amount of students I may be teaching might run in the 30s or 40s, right? But they never all come into class at the same time. So every classroom session is based on who the individual's there. And I look through my works and I see where we're at, or I remember where we're at with different students. And I try to adapt it where each student can get something, even though they're all at different levels, you know? And it is about the curriculum of this of the nation of Gods and Earths, teaching that knowledge of self. But it's also centered around the things that I focused on in life, which simply put was reading, writing, and communication skills. So, writing, because that's always been my craft. Communication skills, because the more I was doing this, the more I was communicating everywhere, and obviously reading, because that's really the obsession that makes everything else work,
So if I'm a young person who's interested about going to the school, but I haven't really, turned a page on wanting to go and be serious about it, what kind of conversation would you have with that person as to what they would get and how they would benefit from going to the school?
A conversation with anyone that walks in, I tell them what they walked into, and I tell them so I'm only telling them so that they could know if they want to leave, so they know exactly what they left. The thing about it is that I'm not teaching anyone to be part of any nation. I don't teach anyone citizenship of any kind. The word nation comes from the Latin root nacer, which means birthright. That's where Spanish words like nació come from. And this is a birthright, so you have to prove it to yourself. But anyone that comes into my classroom is free to learn, whether they decide to do something, be something, say something. As long as they're respectful to learn things, then they're all welcome to come. It doesn't really matter what you want to do. My real goal is to teach anyone that's there, to give them some kind of work in a particularly adapted curriculum, as I was saying, the ability to find their own talents and how to deal with this outside world that of strife and real hell that we're in.
So, for your involvement in the nation and everything that you've done, how do you feel from the time that you started till now? It has prepared you for, as you said, for the outside world and the strife and everything that we are encountering, from the political to religion to how we even interact with one another.
Yeah. It's very difficult to twilight zone that. Like, what would life be without this knowledge of self? Because a lot of times it feels like the studies and the things I had to do to get it, though, were different. Because the gods were in so many areas of Brooklyn and Manhattan and the Bronx, many people were hearing about it. But I come from a part of Brooklyn which I often call the lung of Medina, because there was very little breath there. You know what I mean? No one in Sunset Park was saying, hey, the original man is God, and let alone the black man, because Latinos weren't trying to say that they were black in any kind of way, even though every aspect of food, clothing, music was, is African, and indigenous, right? But so the knowledge of self is something that I had to go get. I had to say, I want to learn this, and I had to go get it. I had to go to Harlem, go to the parts of Harlem, and cross over from Spanish Harlem, which I spent a lot of time in, and then go on the other side, where the school by the Apollo,
Right.
And so in dealing with it like that, I had to get this knowledge, because I actually went and got it. So if I decided, if the world was, if it was an alternate universe and I didn't go, it would have meant that I just decided not to learn certain things. And that never really would have went with my character. I don't know an alternate universe like that,
I feel you.
Because a lot of people hear it, and they kind of hear things, whether it's a song, whether it's music, and it's around them, so they become that, but it's not really in their heart, or it's not really something that they want to continue to study. They'd rather just believe it. Yeah. And that's the worst thing to do with anything, is just to believe it.
Without doing your research.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So you bring up an interesting point that I always wanted to ask you about. So for most people, the Nation of Islam and the Nation of Gods and Earths are really associated with the black community and culture. But you have been instrumental in passing the message along to Latino brothers as well. How has that process been? Did you receive a lot of pushback? Because as you mentioned,
yeah, I mean that you even asked the question means that right, you know,
right, exactly.
I would say this. I only notice massive pushback when I go on YouTube, because YouTube has all these anonymous people that say crazy things and they don't really get anything.
Right.
But a lot of my influence is understanding who is learning and who isn't learning. You know, so even in the classroom, I'm the best learner. I'm the one that's guaranteed to learn something every single night. If not about a subject, about pedagogy all the time, the science of teaching. And when I was getting this knowledge coming from a neighborhood that didn't have it at all, and was always trying not to see what I saw as very overt connections between black and brown. I even developed my name, my righteous name, Sunez, as a way of making that statement. So, you know, some of us make names out of acronyms, out of our supreme alphabet, right? And the supreme mathematics is really our language, and it develops into a dialect from the lessons that we take from the Nation of Islam and analyze, and also the supreme alphabet that Allah the Father made to go along with the supreme math. Supreme mathematics and alphabet are not from the Nation of Islam, and many of us make names out of the supreme alphabet. You know, just meanings behind each letter, and they kind of detail principles that you would see in the mathematics. So I made an acronym out of my name, and I said, Savior of the universe now shows and proves the equality of zigzag zig. And zigzag zig means knowledge, wisdom, understanding, right? Or simply put, Sun is Allah, right? And when I had done that, it was a message to say to Latino brothers that you're also God, and also a message to black brothers that, listen, your diaspora is bigger than what you think. Because I think, and I still say, the problem with race today isn't so much, it has many facets, always has many facets, but the biggest facet that we can control is the limitations that we put on the diaspora, you know? And we see these limitations all the time, whether it's ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, saying, hey, it's only us that deserve this, because we're defining ourselves by the levels of oppression. And they're always going to be different. I will always be treated different in certain ciphers than a darker brother. That's just the way it is. It was designed that way. This has nothing to do with our genetic makeup or unity. You know, and when we look at what a knowledge of self is, it isn't our experiences that makes us what we call the true and living God, or her, the true and living earth. It's who we actually are. So it has nothing to do with how people treat us. You know, if we just did and wiped out all, white folk, who would we be? How would we rate ourselves? You know, how would we balance ourselves? We'd still be in a lot of quandaries here. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's very deep. I never thought of it from that
perspective. So it's really about who we are and not. You know, a lot of people go, they're teaching about this, about white people, that about white people. We're teaching a knowledge of self. We're teaching a history of our people, and we're also teaching a genetic reality of our people. But we're also teaching all of the human family. So that includes whites and all of them. I've taught all the shades.
Oh, really?
I've taught every nationality. I've taught a ton of countries that I can't even list. You know what I mean?
Really?
And so it's about the way a man behaves. So with a knowledge of self, a man will be righteous because he will know right from wrong. He'll be able to discern it, because with mathematics, he'll be able to discern principles from what is just desires. You know? But when it comes to Latinos, obviously me teaching all these years, the amount of years I've taught at the school since 2000, that's the most that anyone's ever taught at that school. So obviously over the years, I mean, there's way more Latinos that I have taught than anyone else, just because I've been there longer, but also because people feel more comfortable, you know, and I think that because these teachings came out of the Nation of Islam, and those were deliberately focused on African Americans, right? Even though when you read deeper into the teachings and Elijah Muhammad's books themselves, they brought in the base. The main thrust was toward African Americans. Allah was the first one to say that the original man is the black, brown, and yellow seed. and it'll be all of them in unity, and neither one is greater than the other. They're all one and the same. And that was something that affected me when I heard that, you know? And because when I went there, in my mind, when I first went there, in my mind, I was like, well, if they say I'm not the original man, I'm just going to tell them they're wrong and leave. Because it was all ego, you know? Right. I'm God and I don't care, you know what I mean? It was all ego. It had nothing to do with like science after a while, you know? Right. When I was going there in the very beginning. But being able to teach all these years, the only people that have limitations are really those that haven't really studied certain things. And it was something that I was used to because being a journalist in hip hop, I was always dealing with the pushing aside of Puerto Ricans to deny the black diaspora that made hip hop culture and not just African Americans. You know, but there's a lot of scholars out there that write that African Americans made hip hop culture, and they'll take away the Latino side, they'll take away the Spanish Caribbean side, they'll even take away the West Indian side, which is ridiculous, you know. So, you know, Herc was just playing with speakers, like, I don't know. Have you read things like that? So,
word, very true, very true, very interesting. So, excuse me. One of the things that, you know, I'm very impressed by when I read your work and I hear you speak is your vocabulary. You use a lot of words that very impactful. Talk a little bit about the importance or the power of words, and, you know, you mentioned communication. For me personally, I think, you know, the way we speak to each other it's underappreciated. People don't understand or realize the impact of talking to people and actually casting spells on people based on how you talk to them and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about that.
Whether it's hip hop, whether it's getting the knowledge of self or just teaching others, that word original always comes up. You are original, be original, make sure it's original. So it's always been obsessive with trying to do something unique. And it merges into all of those fields. It merges into using great words, just, you know, saying things uniquely that have more substance. But also as a teacher, when you teach students that you may not see again, I have had students I've never seen again. I have had students die on me. I have had students progress immaculately, and I didn't know I gave them anything. I may have taught them one or two times and it influenced them. Right. Or I may have guided them through a whole process. You know, the thing is that I've always thought about, this may be my only time to ever know this person. So I have to make sure that I say something calculated, something that contains all of the sincerity that I have. And if I could say it with as few words as possible, then just maybe it might sting in them like something that they can remember, you know? And it just became a way, you know, it just became a way that I'm speaking, you know? I promise I'm not trying to use big words on purpose, you know?
No, it's you know, because I've actually had to look up words. Like, what does he mean? But then when I look it up, I'm like, oh, it fits perfectly in what he's trying to say. It's almost, honestly, it's almost like poetry, the way you write. Right. It's really what, you know. I've read a lot of stuff, but in the beginning of my writing career, I was really influenced by hip hop. Those were the writers that I was looking at, and the first writer that I think of immediately is because when I got knowledge of self, I thought everything I wrote before was wrong. So I had started, I was writing since 1994, being published either in school newspapers or in magazines. And when I got knowledge of self, I was like, wait a minute, I'm the God. And there's a lot of writings I have before that was saying all the wrong stuff. And it was really Jizza when I heard the Beneath the Surface album. And, you know, he had that line in I don't want to quote it. If I can't, I probably paraphrase it if I mess it up. But he said the significance was not the vulgar applause of entrance, but that feeling, that exit, completion of a sentence. That's all it took. The whole thing he has lines that are way better than that in the song, like the immortality of my fame is the measure of others' torture, burnt off from a flaming author. That was dope. That was mind blowing. But then he said that later about it's not the vulgar applause of entrance, but that feeling, that
that feeling, the completion of a sentence. And I was like, man, all I have to do is write.
Right.
And I had started writing journals in 1998 because when I was trying to get the knowledge of self, I couldn't steal all of these books. Literally, I was in the Baruch College Library, and it's past statute of limitations. There's no way to prove it, right? I was literally looking at books, so saying, I'm not ready to go to the school, Allah School. I'm worried. Let me read everything about history that I can. So I read every Elijah book they had. Checking the Diop's works, Sertima's works. I was reading all of them, and I was ripping out pages just to, I can't remember that. I need to know this. And I would rip it out. And it was one book, Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, a monumental work about the history of, of Africa and how it was destroyed, right? Seminal work. That book was skinny by the time I was ripping. And so I put it all back in and said, I just can't do it. I can't do it. So I kept the book longer. And I started to write in my journal everything in it. And after a while, I would write about things I read and write word for word. And then I would comment on it. And I would try to comment as if I was speaking to that individual that wrote the book. So if it was Riz's book, like Dao Wu, it would be conversational. It don't matter. But if it was Diop's book, like especially he didn't even speak English, but I've seen him translated, and he was so furious that I was like, his diction and his elocution, he must have been crazy. I can't just talk sloppy to him.
Right.
So I would write down like I was really like talking to him in a classroom setting. And it just became an exercise like that. And I tended to remember things easier like that. And it would help my communication skills in different places. The magic of Ebonics is being able to speak to everyone, not to an individual, not to one individual the same way.
Right.
And that was kind of like how that developed as far as speaking, and then it just came across in the writing. But I said Jizza because he also said, and this was influencing me from the beginning, he said, half short, twice strong. So I was always trying to say everything in this concentrated one sentence thing. Like, and I still do the activity. Like when I tweet, I'll say everything in one tweet. And I'm like, I don't want to do 2 tweets for this. I'm going to put it all in one tweet. And it just becomes a thing. It just becomes an exercise, know? And hopefully it'll be beautifully written enough where people will go back and admire the way it was written. And be worthy of admission,
Yeah, no, that's exactly the experience I have with some of the stuff you've
I appreciate that. I appreciate that greatly.
What? Wow, it's eloquent. And I'm like, oh, I don't understand what this word means. Let me go look it up. And I'm like, oh, now it makes even more sense. That's dope. Being a good, like I said, people don't understand the importance of being a good communicator. I think a lot of, or some of the issues that we encounter with people is we don't communicate well.
Right.
Oftentimes we don't listen to understand. We listen to just be able to respond. Yeah,
I think a lot of the gods, they're known for like building with their understanding and being forceful. I'm from Brooklyn, Medina, so we're supposed to be like that. And often a lot of people don't know I'm from Medina because I don't fit that mold immediately.
Right.
I'm much more calm and things like that in my demeanor. But one of the things I found in the classroom setting especially is if I'm going to be able to say something significant and short and really precise that could stick with them, I spend a lot of time in the classroom listening to the students speak, and trying to find out what they're about, what they do. So if a person ever decides to come to my class Thursday night, you're going to speak first, not me. I'm going to learn about you because it's really something that is for you, not me.
Okay. On that point, we're going to take a little break right now. We are here with the God Sunez Allah. I want to get into that a little bit, how it goes when somebody shows up to the school. As you said, you have them speak first. Okay. So we're going to take a little break. Stay tuned. We are here. It's The Conversation. Yes. Thank you, everyone. We are back on The Conversation with the God Sunez Allah. Before we took the break, you started to get into a little bit about when students show up to the school. You said you actually have them speak first. So talk a little bit about what's the process before you start the class and, everyone is gathered in. What do you go through or what do you speak to them about first?
It always depends on who's there. I'm the first student that's there. So it's never demanded that people come. So if no one comes, I sit there for 3 hours and I read and write. You know, so it's fun. Yeah. Right. And when people that I don't know come in, you know, I have them sit down and say, you know, what was your journey here? Like, you know, it's not the most fanciful building, you know. It says Allah School in Mecca, so people are already thrown off. It says Allah, this and that. And I ask them questions about their journey, where they heard about this, if they even know who I am, and things like that. Because they may have seen videos of me online teaching, right? You know, or doing hip hop stuff. I don't know. You know, it's strangers, you know. And if I do know them, then we continue where we left off. Okay. You know, and I learned to merge the two. One of the elders that really taught me how to teach was Savior Knowledge, along with my mentor, of course, David Traverso. But Savior Knowledge taught me how to teach in that type of classroom. And he always told me to teach and speak to the one that knows the least. And so that the others that know more don't lose out, I change the pedagogy. So I think of a jazz singer. I try to sing the song different every time, you know? And so if somebody comes to my class, it's about finding out what they would like to learn, you know? As I learn of someone better, then because of my experience, I'll try to tell them, like, you know, I think that you might need this, you know, you'd be better off. I think you should learn this. This would be very useful to you, you know, and things like that, you know. But that only comes when I know you. I don't want to be pompous, though. You didn't walk into, you know, the 36th chamber, you know, like, you know, or 35th chamber, actually, and you know, I just blow wind at you, you know. If I could, I probably would do that, you know, just for the hell of it. But
no, but you got integrity.
I'd pick you back up. It was just to play around, but the thing about it is, you know, it's about knowing the people first. You know what I mean?
I got you.
And seeing what they need to know. You know, if people walk into that school, especially now where everything is so digital online, you can go get everything. You know, to take that journey and to walk in there says something about an individual. Yeah, definitely. You know, contrary to popular belief, though, there might be old men there, but I think people don't understand old people anymore. You know, older people, you know, like, they don't know how to talk to them. They don't know how to revere them. They don't know how to listen to something abrasive because someone has years behind it. Right. So they don't know how to take all that in and be tough enough to say, oh, okay, I want to learn this and still have your forceful way without seeming and being, you know, steeped in arrogant youth, you know? And we don't really converse to learn things from elders anymore, you know? And that's the whole thing. I got an education in college, but the best part about college was the experience I had with the elder professors outside of the classroom. So that's when I knew that if I had an experience with certain learned elders in the street, then it would be worthwhile as well. Right. So, you know, I spent a lot of time with older people listening and doing very little speaking. You know, many of the elders that taught me, they didn't see me speak that much until it was time to prove something or to show something that I have learned, you know. So if you come to my classroom, you know, it's about learning who you are. You've stepped into, you know, this realm. So I want to know what we can do, you know, to help you and not waste your time, you know.
Important. What would you say is some of the biggest challenges in teaching?
The biggest challenge in teaching is being a good student. When you teach for a long time, you can kind of even predict who will come and who will come back. You know, and this is often a thing I never tell anyone except my earth, you know, who will be synonymous to my wife, right? I'll tell her because, you know, gets a cheat sheet. So she'll ask me, and I'll say, yeah, he's not coming back. Right. He did the way he was, you know. Yeah. But he'll probably be back, and I've always been right. But the difficult challenge is really being a good student. It's never about the student. The student is never a difficulty for me. The student could be wild, they could be abrasive, all of those things. You know what I mean? But I've been well trained in all aspects, you know? So, and I feel comfortable with our people. So the thing is, a teacher develops arrogance, you know? Just like, you know, the MC develops arrogance, you know? And sometimes people don't listen to the teacher anymore if he has an arrogance or the cloak of arrogance. It might not be anything. It just be a cloak. Like, for example, like people will say that about KRS-One, but the times I have talked to KRS-One, he's been humble and willing to learn and willing to hear things and, of course, teach a lot. You know what I mean? So I always remind myself to go back and be a stronger student. So between every Thursday, it's more about what am I going to learn, you know? And I keep notes of the students, but they're mainly to write my own notes of what I could have done and what ought to be done. So it's really about keeping that, you know, mind of a student, you know, what the Buddhists, the Zen Buddhists call the mind of a baby, always excited by everything, as opposed to the mind of an expert. You know, they know everything already. There's nothing to learn. I always try to keep a baby's mind, you know.
See, jewels are being dropped right now. Pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you mentioned the schools, you teach every Thursday from 7 to
10 p.m. If you come at 9:50, I'm done. You know what I mean? I'm out. I'm
and anybody can
out.
just show up.
But yeah, anyone can show up, you know? And I've taught all age groups. The age groups probably run from like 5 to 80, you know? Like I've taught all, you know, individuals. Like people have come with the children, so I teach the children. I teach their babies, you know, and I teach people what I think that they could use. So you're not walking to a class and say, you're the true and living God. It isn't like, the Ice Cube video, where they have Khalid Muhammad just going in, which is dope, but no, it's not that, you know. Okay. I want to, you know what I mean, but no, it's not that, you know. But
so thank you for talking about that, brother. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So just to switch gears a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, Sunez is an accomplished author and journalist. When I say the word journalist, what meaning does that have for you?
A journalist is a historian of the present time. So they have a way of discerning the most important angle often that they think should be covered. Because a journalist is often giving you the intriguing story, they often can take the part of history that isn't being told, but they often can tell the part of history that is incorrect. Is the incorrect angle because it's the more intriguing story. Right. So as a journalist, what to me is always to take the opportunity to try to show all the facets, even within the angle that you've taken. Show an angle within a spectrum, you know. And but again, a journalist is a historian of the moment, so he should have the respect of that, because when a historian goes back to look up certain things, he's going to articles by journalists often, and he's going to see those pieces. If he goes to a work of sociology, a sociologist really is often journalizing groups of individuals, you know? So that's a journalist in himself in many ways too, you know? So that's what a journalist means to me.
And, you know, there's the saying that the pen is mightier than the sword. So what does that saying mean to you as a journalist?
First I agree with the statement, you know, every single way. I've used both, you know what I mean? So right. The pen is mightier than the sword, you know what I mean? The pen stays there longer, and obviously you can share love and you can share sincerity with the pen far easier than the sword. Now, if you understand the martial art, you can share sincerity and love with the sword as well, because we give mercy. You know, and also with the way that you move the sword, you tell a story. But with the pen, though, you're leaving certain moments for posterity every single time you write. You know, so there are certain things that I have that I've written that weren't even designed for this lifetime. Like I've written certain things for the future. Okay, you know, and when we say the pen is mightier than the sword, it's because of that. They can share an understanding that to a person that you will never be able to meet. And that aspect, that profound gift is monumental to me.
It's powerful.
You know, it's incredible, you know?
So out of all the work that you've published to this day, what are you most proudest of?
Of what I've published?
Yeah.
That's hard to say, you know? A writer hates every last thing he wrote, you know. So
Is that the case for you?
often, yeah, it's all trash, you know.
I would beg to differ, but I hear what you're saying.
But what I'm most proud of is I had an idea, especially because I'm mainly a music journalist, even though I've written journalism, news journalism, and all historical journalism and other things. It's about, I'm most proud of coming up with something and able to fulfill it all these years later. So the work that I've done this decade, I'm most proud of, you know, because when I started to write in 1994, by early 95 in March, I had published a piece because I'm from Sunset, and I called my column Sunset Style. And, you know, I had the bubble letters. My brother Smo, he made the whole bubble letter Sunset Style thing, all of that, right? And I was publishing this through wherever I could, but mainly in the college newspaper, the Ticker at Baruch College. And I said there was one thing wrong about us journalists writing about hip hop music, and that's that we're not really making culture. We're not an element because we're just talking about things.
Right.
So no matter how good I would detail something, it was missing. And I had written in that piece that when we write something creative and we cover the works or we cover the culture, that's when it becomes an actual unique element. And it'll be unique because no one is doing both, making a creative work and also covering the actual culture that is surrounding them.
Right.
You know? Only certain hip hop songs can do that lyrically. You know, like we think with Karis. Remember the Karis one Marley Marl album? He said I was there, so he's talking about what was there and is doing that as well, right? So other writers and journalists to me were part of the element. I just made it an overt thing. I overtly said it, but it was the writers that inspired me, and particularly within hip hop, it was Bones Malone. And Bones Malone was writing creative pieces that I didn't understand, and I loved them more because I was like, "Wow, what does that mean?" You know what I mean? And it was so artfully written. And I said, "What if we did that, but while we were talking about music?" So all the years when I went through The Source, when I went through Vibe, let me do it in order. Vibe, Double XL, The Source, you know, all of these and everything in between, Stress, Hook.com, all of these little publications, One Love, there's a whole bunch of stuff I wrote for. Anything that would pay me, you know what I mean? Or just let me write, right? No one would let me really try that. It was always X'd out. It was always changed. It was like, oh, you wrote it in such a way where it doesn't make sense. And I said, it does if you just let him hold it. You know what I mean? Let him hold that. You know what I mean? Because I'm writing almost with what I'm inspired by, an MC's aesthetic. You know what I mean? Like, hold that. And then, you know, analyze that. Rewind. Like, I want to rewind the article. Like, rewind. Go read it in the beginning again. You know what I mean? And when I write it, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, you know, and I'm trying to fix it in such a way where you rewind it and it makes sense the way I meant it, you know? And this decade, because I started to work with Kevlar 7, who passed away, right? Remembered Imperfection, RIP. And he's part of the Wiseman. Bronze Nazareth is his brother.
Oh, word? Okay.
And who's part of the Wu Elements and all that. They're part of the Wiseman. And he rhymed and everything, but him and Paragon, my brother Paragon, who does graphics, they decided to make the site. And he said, yo, Sunez, write in this site for us, and you could do whatever you want. Once I got that freedom, like that canvas, I decided to do it. And I was able to merge the creative fully with the technical, journalistic, historical writing about the actual music. And that's what I'm most proud of, you know, because that's, you know, of what I've published. You know, the book I'm about to publish soon about my martial arts writings and how it deals with the knowledge of self, and that's also creative work as well. That's probably what I'm most proud of, because I wrote that as if it's the last thing I'm gonna write ever. So after I wrote that, I really was free to write anything else.
Dope,
you know?
dope.
So, you know, those two things I'm proud of. You know.
So I know you have a recent work that you
Right. Yeah.
A little bit about that.
The book is called The Filtered Reel, Essays from the Invisible Renaissance, right? So this decade has so much music, you know? And in the beginning, like 2013, 14, I came up with The Filtered Reel. And I was writing about albums because I'm an obsessed album collector, right? And I think that's the pinnacle culmination, like that's the pinnacle of an artist's work is the album. So I was writing about that. But then there's a lot of other guys with songs and stuff, and I thought they were dope. So I was like, let me make a column called Filtered Reel, and I could just take some of the best songs and just quickly throw them out there, you know? Things got slower for me too because I'm writing creatively. So a piece about someone's work is also becoming my creative piece. So it takes longer to write that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I wrote about albums as opposed to like just one song.
Right.
But I still wanted to write. So I wrote that column, Filtered Reel. And the paragraph that introduces the Filtered Reel became my introduction to the Power Right Show, my podcast. But the Filtered Reel, I didn't even keep up with the Filtered Reel. That's how many songs came out. But I always call this decade the Invisible Renaissance.
Why is that?
And I called it the Invisible Renaissance because if the golden era was the 90s, 80s into the 90s, and the quality of the music, the peak music of recorded hip-hop music, I've always considered the 2000s the dark ages. It's where commercialism took its root, is where certain people were christened gold and things like that really aren't to me. It's where certain things, and I give you a perfect example of why it's the dark ages. While I was at Double XL, and this is what they did, it's not what I did, so, you know, it's not my fault that I'm exposing, you know, a Hitler level event, but
Hitler level. Let's get it.
Nazi level event. But when they made up Eye Candy in Double XL, that led to I forgot the spin-off magazine that led off to that. But there was one, and I didn't go with them to write in that because I couldn't write about women in their dimensions. It just wasn't my thing, you know what I mean? And right now the dimensions aren't real, so it's like, doesn't matter, right? What are you writing, right? What are you writing about? You know, yeah. It's like writing about Barry Bonds' muscles, you know, in
you know what I'm saying?
2000s.
Exactly.
You know? But when they had Eye Candy, that was a perfect example because as the years went on, another major publication was that I saw how it helped ruin hip hop because the Eye Candy ended up glamorizing the video vixen. It even gave him that name, Video Vixen, right? What happened was that, though, is that they were now giving a female artist a section in every magazine. That sounds good. But when I would pitch somebody, and this is the era that I was in, the 2000s, so I'm in there sitting, and I said, hey, how about Jean Grey? If you got a good 2000s collection, you have something by Jean Grey, right? You start with the album she did with Ninth Wonder, right? Which had the multiple covers where she was doing the Cuban links, the Das Effects one, right? That's my favorite one of hers, but she had a lot of great albums. She's one of the great female MCs, right? You know, but ever, like if you make a list, she's got to be on it. She's so clever. But I said, how about Jean Grey? I said, no, we already took that spot. I said, where? I said, in this page. And I go back in the layouts and I see where they laid out. And I said, oh, that's the Eye Candy. Like that's we're using it for that. So the Eye Candy woman, you know, who's just, you know, big boob Barbara is now representing an artist. So Jean Grey's Woodful spot, or at least the pitch for her is not even there. Right. I can't even pitch her because the spot is taken. So, and that leads into this whole thing that we have where like that is more glamorized, you know, and it was way before Instagram that became a thing, you know, way before. So that's what I mean by dark ages, you know what I mean? You know, the commercialization, the acceptance of commercialized sounds became more of a thing, you know what I mean? The regression of the music, you know, so like it's the difference between, let's say, somebody using 808 drums and someone using 808 drums sloppily with doing it worse than Run DMC. It's not a progression or a throwback, it's a devolution. So there's a difference. And the 2000s were the dark ages for me. And also my career. I really hated writing during those times. You know what I mean? And when I call this the Invisible Renaissance, it was not only me with an open canvas. Of course, that had something to do with it. But when you look past the model that's already been set for commercial rap radio, there's a wealth of incredible artists. If you like them with style and pizzazz, you have Roc Marciano, and you have so many artists like that. If you like them with depth and you just want to hear lyrics, you have people like Ka, you know. If you want to hear people that are hardcore lyricists, you have people like Spit Gems. You want to hear ultimate B-boys, performers like Frank Knight, Starvin' B. You have lyricists all over the world, like Nebraska has Sleep Sinatra, you know, major talents.
Right.
So I'm going everywhere and finding all these people, and I can't even listen to them and enjoy them all at once. So it just became a wonderful overload. And when I wrote this book, I was writing a column I write once every year, the best of, and I call it the Real of that year. So it was the Real of 2018. I never wrote it because when I was writing it, I was looking through about 200 albums that I wanted to say something about. And so in writing that, I used all of the pieces about those albums to springboard into different essays about this entire decade of the 2010s.
Wow.
And it has the two facets that make up, to me, this element of hip-hop writer. Science on music, detailing more than just that's a banging beat, that's a hot take. You know, that's not writing about music. And also that art on art. I'm inspired by the art of that I'm listening to.
Right.
So it's provoking my art, you know? And mixed in all that, it becomes this book. And so it has those essays. It has certain essays that over the course of the decade, I felt like would give people an idea about the decade. And it also has a list because people love them lists. So I put a list of some. I wrote some because I already looked at it after publishing. I was like, oh, I missed this sister. I missed that brother.
Right.
But a list where people could say, how deep is this? And I have like a ton of names. You know, a ton of names of people to go check out that, you know, because it's not about me telling you who's the best. That's the worst thing you could do. It's about me telling you why I think they're good or they're the best, you know?
Right.
And that's what the Filtered Real is about, you know? It's about filtering the real away from the commercial, going deeper beneath the surface and seeing like this whole world, a whole world of incredible music, you know?
Is that available now or it's coming out?
Yeah, it's actually out now. It's on Amazon. If you look it up on Amazon, if you're on the social media and you can, you know, contact me in the IG and it's Sunez and the Instagram. It's Sunez on the, you know, Twitter, Facebook, you know, and you know, if you want an autograph copy, you can Cash App me, you know, Sunez and all that, and the PayPal, all of that stuff is available. But yeah, it's out now, you know.
So I want to just touch on one of this last topics before we get out of here. As I mentioned in the beginning, you were the recipient of the 2017 Hip Hop Pioneer of the Year Award. And I just want to read a little blurb of the accolade. So it starts off, hip hop culture is alive and well. Its survival can be credited to the efforts of those who have taken a sincere interest in keeping what is real and helping so many oppressed people reach their dreams well preserved. No greater example shines forth in this regard than the 2017 Hip Hop Pioneer of the Year Award winner, Sunez Allah. Amazingly, Sunez has built a home for true hip-hop culturalists with news, interviews, music reviews, battle, fashion, and a good amount of spectacular goonage to make both the novice and the OG feel comfortable living the life. So when you hear something like that, how does that make you feel?
Peace to my brother Messiah. He has these awards he gives out, and you know he honored me with that award. But to write that, and he's a great writer and poet himself, you know. I don't know what to say about that. I think that my intention was to write, to do something in hip hop, just like everyone else, to do something unique, and it didn't work with the elements everybody was talking about, and so I made my own. You know what I mean? And when it comes to learning and achieving things, all of these, whatever they are, it's just about taking the opportunities when they come. So I just spend my life preparing myself. So I don't spend my life preparing for a moment to do something. I spend my life doing things that would keep me better, that just happen to keep me prepared for things. But they're things I love. You know, so I train my body. I write, I read, you know, and these are things I enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
So they just become things that happen to prepare me for other things.
Right.
You know what I mean? And fulfilling the talents is like the main tenet of my classroom.
Mm.
And so, because it's been what's been most useful for me.
Right.
So if I achieved all that, it was really just by just trying to do everything, you know, and it's with a fury. I admit it's with a fury, you know. I because the minute I got this knowledge of self, the minute I was radicalized to any oppression that we were living in as a real context that affects our lives, I realized that I had spent almost 20 years not knowing anything and just being ignorant, you know. So that has always been a fuel, you know. There's always been fuel, and it's been like that way with everything, you know. So I've always tried to collect every book possible, collect every piece of music possible. I want to hear everything, listen to everything. And it just, you know, it leads to many works.
I hear you.
You know?
Thank you for that. Before we get out of here, any recommendations on books or literature that would be interesting for people to?
You know, as a note, one of the first things that I give out to students is a 50-book beginner list. If they're dealing with the knowledge of self, there's like 50 books to start. Like, they're beginner books that you should have in your collection, and also books that they're easier for the starter. So like an example of a beginner book in history would be Cheikh Diop's African Origin of Civilization. But it should be there. But it's hard to read. That's a tough book, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you should have it. But then maybe an easier one would be Introduction to African Civilization by John Jackson. Like, you know, so it has both in those lists. But if I could give you a list of just favorites, because there are books that I read again every single year at least once. You know, and because of the martial arts and all that, and I had to write them down because I always forget. I don't want to forget.
Please do. Thank you.
There's a book that Save Your Knowledge. One of my teachers always taught me to give to a student first, and it's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. You know, it basically has the entire mental tenet that we deal with. Though, as a man thinketh, so is he. Man is the sum of all of his thoughts.
Right.
That's, you know, that's it.
Right.
And it's really a simpler version of an ancient Buddhist text called the Dhammapada. So that's a book that's written beautifully because it's aphorisms, right? Sayings of understanding written beautifully. So I don't begin the student with that, you know. But it's one of my favorite books. I love that book,
Right.
the Dhammapada. So I always read that. As a martial artist, I always read Morihei Ueshiba's Art of Peace. He's a martial artist that if you said he's up there with Bruce Lee, like toe to toe is like legends. He's the founder of Aikido.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't know who would win if they sparred. Like that's how
Wow.
they're amazing. You look them up. But the Art of Peace is a wonderful book, and you don't have to be a martial artist for it. It's a mentality. As a thinker, as a writer, as a teacher, I always loved a very, very short text by Confucius called The Great Learning. It's about 7 pages long. I read it and study it every year. Then also, as martial arts, I always loved Bruce Lee's. People always talk about Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. I love his earlier book, The Tao of Gung Fu, because it talks about the mentality of hip hop and the philosophy, and that is more longer lasting than looking at pictures of a punch, which I never could figure out. I have to get hit first to figure out the thing, you know what I mean? And then also as a writer, like the biggest influences me as a writer are really Amiri Baraka and Miguel Pinheiro, if I had to name immediately. So all their writings, just anything that they wrote, whether it's Amiri Baraka's writings on jazz or his creative writings, because he's the first that did both. To me, that I was reading, and I was like, I could do that.
Right.
And merge the two just as he has. So, you know, and I did it in hip hop, what he was doing in jazz, you know.
Okay.
But those are the books. And if we talk about knowledge of self, of the books I edited, I think the easiest one to really share with someone that hasn't gone there and they want to read a book, I probably would start with Star Allah's book, The Righteous Way, and any version of that book, the Jubilee edition, or I edited them all, so they're all dope, you know.
A great wealth of knowledge and work here. I appreciate you for coming and sitting down with me, brother.
I'm so honored. Thank you.
Thank you, and letting people know about what you do and the importance of being influential in our communities and our cultures. You can do it too. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Where can people follow you?
They could follow me on Twitter, Sunez7, if I remember. Sunez, Sunez on IG, the Instagram, and my full honorable name is Edward Rodriguez. So if you look up Edward Sunez Rodriguez on the Facebook, you'll find me there too.
Okay. Once again, thank you, brother, for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sunez Allah, the peace, teaches the peace course at the Allah School in Manhattan, Mecca, every Thursday from 7 to 10 p.m. And also, where can people check out the Power Right Show?
Yeah, the Power Right Show is on S Street Media. You can go to Ustream, look up S Street Media, or look up S Street Media on YouTube, and you can find the Power Right Show, which is the only show about my element, the hip hop writer. So
there you go. Another reason to have him here. Once again, thank you everyone for joining me for the conversation. Always check out new episodes every Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, only on madeforkings.com. Peace.